Everybody, thanks for. I'm looking around. I've been down here, Rob, in a number of years, and it's great to be back. My hometown in San Francisco, particularly being here at the I Hotel, which is so much extraordinary history that connects to me personally and professionally in so many different ways. Having grown up in San Francisco, grown up not too far from where we are, having grown up to a father who was very attached to this hotel in its original incarnation when Enrico Benducci had a club here, a connection historically at this hotel for me growing up, watching folks come and go from Richard Hangisto, former sheriff here in San Francisco, to many infamous and some more famous San Franciscans that made their way in and around this community, but also made their name for themselves here at this hotel in an effort to try to save it. Vestiges of World War II, turning GIs and recognition, the need for more housing. A lot of single-room occupancy hotels were built, not only in this community in San Francisco, but all across the state, for that matter, all across the country. The single-room occupancy hotels really were the backbone of our middle class, working families, working class that were making a go of it. And of course, this hotel legendarily was the center of a fight in 1977 with evictions. And it connects not only a dot in terms of the history of this city and a little bit of my own history, but Cynthia's history, who just walked up next to her son, Rob Bonta, and the reason we're really here. Cynthia Rob's mother was out here organizing tenants in the 1970s, organizing against evictions. She was one of many people that felt the stress and the indignities of that moment very personally, as a member of the Filipino community, as someone who came here on a boat ride that her son will talk about, I'm sure, in a moment, and came to California, came to the Bay Area. This was a point of advocacy for her. Of course, that advocacy is not unique just to Rob Bonta's mother. That advocacy lives within him as a son, not only of a remarkable mother, but a remarkable father, who also was a strong advocate, who went to Selma and marched with Martin Luther King, someone who lived out there in the fields, working with Cesar Chavez, as he and his wife Cynthia did as well. As a young child, Rob was there in a small trailer, growing up, literally the tutelage of not only two extraordinary parents that were social justice warriors, racial justice warriors, advocates for human rights and certainly farm worker rights, but he also had the privilege of being there and picking up cues, spoken and unspoken, of Cesar Chavez and others that were around. It is no surprise that we are here today after his journey and after his parents' example, sparking that notion of justice at a very early age. What a remarkable career Rob Bonta has had. A career also attaches to the city and county of San Francisco, where he worked after law school here for John Kecker, one of our top litigators in the United States, for a year before working for Dennis Herrera, one of the finest deputy city attorney, well, one of the finest city attorneys' offices in America. Dennis has done just a remarkable job conveying talent. And one of those young men was Rob Bonta, working in the city attorney's office for close to 9 years, doing trials, doing the real work. It wasn't just an intellectual exercise, doing complex litigation, not just being part of the trial team for close to 9 years, working for Dennis Herrera. He worked from that vantage point and ultimately ran for local office in Alameda County City Council, where he served until he was elected in 2012 to the California Assembly. I, of course, left the most important part for last, and that's a little bit more about his history that I didn't mention. I mentioned his childhood, his parents. I mentioned more of his professional career up into his current role as an Alameda, San Leandro, and Oakland Assembly member. But the most important part was when he fell in love and met his wife at just the age of 17, Mia, who any of you know, talk about a fierce advocate for justice. President of Alameda Unified School Board, someone who's, well-known leader in the East Bay, working CEO of Oakland Promise, among many other roles that she has in the community. But they met as undergraduates in a small college, some of you may have heard of, called Yale, which I don't hold against you. The fact that you went to Yale Law School after, I do kind of hold against you. You can sense the overachiever in him. And I won't even mention the year in Oxford. This is not my path to this podium. His is very different. But a remarkable journey and life together, just 17 years old. They've been together since, with young dog now, not just young children. I always talk about that damn dog. I love dogs. I got so many dogs, though, that I can say damn because they're working me for a third dog at home right now. 21 chickens, a rabbit, and 6 birds. So anyway, that was an aside. That was more therapy for father here. But I make that point because this is a remarkable family. And I punctuate that point because their life story, their journey, their advocacy has really sort of prepared them for this moment. When I think and thought through the process of who should be the next Attorney General, state of California, mindful of Attorney Generals of the past, the desk that I have in my office, governors, well-known attorney, former Governor Earl Warren, reminded of the incredible work that was done and by not only his time and tenure and the utilization of the law as a tool to ultimately advance the cause of justice, but so many others that have come before and after. And it's a proud post, proud position, and it's incredibly potent position. One of the most important positions, not just in the state, arguably in the United States of America. When we think about the power of this office, just consider the good work that our former Attorney General Becerra did pushing back against all things Trump and Trumpism. Just think about the work that was done not to undo the work of this state over the course of the last 4 years. Think about the incredible advocacy more proactively, not just reactively and defensively, of Attorney General Kamala Harris, or for that matter, Attorney General Jerry Brown. It's remarkable footsteps that Rob Bonta will step into. This is an incredibly important office in the cause of, yes, racial justice, social justice, economic justice, environmental justice. By the way, all things professionally since 2012, Rob Bonta has been on the forefront of as well. Gun safety brought to the headlines and front lines of our consciousness in this last week. Rob Bonta has been there consistently as a leader. Issues related to criminal justice more broadly defined, issues of bail reform, leading those efforts on cash bail reform in the legislature, Rob Bonta. When you look at the issues around private prisons, the perversity of private prisons, incentivizing for-profit incarceration, who led that effort to do away with private prisons? Rob Bonta. Across the spectrum, not just on criminal justice issues, but racial justice issues, issues related to immigration, issues related to rights of migrants and asylum seekers. Rob Bonta has been front and center. Issues across the spectrum. He has been a leader. I am being long-winded because he's got a remarkable history, remarkable resume, but he's also, and I'll just end on this, a remarkable person. I have known Rob Bonta for years and years, personally, in my many roles, going back to being a county supervisor, mayor, lieutenant governor, now governor. So I've gotten a firsthand view of not only his career and his professionalism, but also his character and his decency, his willingness to work with people that don't always agree with him, or he's not always agreeing with as well, but never being, forgive me, it's a pun, but disagreeable. It's not a pun. It's almost become rote and cliche to say this, but it's really true. He's not a disagreeable person, and that matters in a world that's so divided, where people are looking to tear people down and take them out. He's a decent human being, person of character, person of honor, and a person who, as I noted, is a fierce advocate of justice. And so with that in mind, it's my great honor, what a privilege it is, to present to you my nominee for the legislature's consideration and approval of the next Attorney General for the greatest state in the United States of America, the state of California, Rob Bonta. Oh yeah, you better say thanks to your mom.
Good afternoon. Wow. Glad my kids got to hear all that from the governor of California. That was special. Thank you, Governor Newsom, for the privilege and honor of a lifetime. And I'm so humbled by the trust and the faith and the confidence that you placed in me. I also want to say thank you. This moment's very special to me. I want to say thank you to my wife, Mia, who, as the governor said, we met when we were all of 17 years old. She's stood by me and believed in me and had my back and loved me ever since. My partner in life and my partner in service. And her mother, my mother-in-law, Magali, has loved me and supported me as well. Thank you for being here, Magali. And my children, I have two of the three here, Reina and Ileana, who's not here, and Andres. Thank you for giving me the joy of a lifetime being your dad. And I stand here because of so many people who've come before me, including people like the Asian Americans and Filipino Americans who assembled right here at the International Hotel on August 4th, 1977. They stood to protect their communities and their homes, and they stood against injustice. And 45 years ago, my mother, Cynthia, was one of those courageous activists who stood outside the International Hotel, linked arms and formed a circle to protect those who were inside from being evicted. And now, my mother, Cynthia, and my father, Warren, who can't make it today, will see a governor nominate their son to be the first Filipino-American Attorney General in the history of California. And the governor set forth all the reasons why, but my parents are my heroes and my role models. They taught me to fight injustice, to right wrongs, and to help people. I wouldn't be here today without them. They are fierce forces for fairness, and they have fought injustice, and that has been hardwired into my DNA. My father, as the governor mentioned, traveled to Selma, Alabama after Bloody Sunday to stand with Martin Luther King Jr. and to organize for voting rights and for civil rights. Soon thereafter, both my parents went to the Philippines, and they served as missionaries, serving others. I was born there, and when I was 2 months old, and Ferdinand Marcos was inching ever closer to his now infamous declaration of martial law, my parents came to California, specifically to La Paz, the headquarters of the United Farmworkers of America movement in the Tehachapi Mountains outside of Bakersfield. And they were recruited to fight for better wages and fairer working conditions. And they literally worked side by side with Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and one of those great Filipino-American leaders who's not talked about enough, Philip Vera Cruz. And I spent my early years there, as the governor mentioned, in a trailer, a stone's throw away from the home of Cesar Chavez. And my parents still have family photos of me as a little boy standing beside Cesar Chavez as he cut his wedding anniversary cake with his wife, Helen. And the lessons that I learned about equality because of La Paz stick with me today. It didn't matter there if you were Cesar Chavez or you were a migrant farm worker. If you were Filipino or Latino or white or black, everyone was committed to the mission, and everyone saw injustice in the world and wanted to fix it. And as I approached school age, we moved away from La Paz, but those lessons, they stuck with me. And it became clear to me that an injustice against one is an injustice against all. And it made me want to become an attorney, to fight for people who've been wronged, who've been hurt, who've been harmed, who've been mistreated, and to be their champion. And it's that fight for justice for all Californians that continues to motivate me. And over the last 8+ years as a California state legislator, I have had the honor of waking up every day, hitting the ground running, to do everything I can, do my best to transform the lives of Californians for the better. And I've got to work with our governor and my amazing colleagues in the legislature to pass critical reforms and to right historic wrongs, like repairing our fundamentally broken criminal justice system, taking on big polluters, protecting renters and homeowners, as well as workers and consumers. And some of the work that I've been really proud of, it's so important now, more than ever, is the work that we've done to stand up against hatred and to help victims of hate crimes. Now more than ever, we need leaders in government and leaders in law enforcement who will build bridges with communities that have been othered, that have been persecuted, that have been targeted. And if I have the honor of being confirmed as Attorney General, that will be one of my top priorities, to make sure that we protect those who are facing the forces of hate and that we hold accountable those who would perpetrate hate violence against others in our community. But hate isn't the only problem we're facing in this state, as we all know. We know that too many Californians continue to be wronged. Too many Californians face human trafficking or other abuse or mistreatment. Too many Californians face unfairness in the many broken parts of our criminal justice system. And they deserve more compassion, more humanity, and a second chance. Too many have been victims of big corporations cheating them, or have been lied to by organized scams or organized fraud. And those fights, your fights, will be my fights. You know, right now, as we see the tragic and horrific rise in hate crimes against our API siblings throughout the nation, I can't help but think about a photograph of a sign from a hotel lobby in 1920 Stockton that I have in my office. It says, "Positively no Filipinos allowed." Throughout California history, so many of us have felt the sting of hate and discrimination. I have. I know many of you have as well. Too many of you. Asian, Latino, Black, Native American, LGBTQ, Jewish, Muslim, Sikh. So many of us have been targeted and attacked because of who we are, where we're from, and who we love. But that hate has not defined who we are or what we can achieve. In California, we have created the most diverse state in the nation. and the most robust democracy in the world. And while that sign may have said positively no Filipinos allowed in the 1920s, in today's California, everyone is not just allowed, we belong. And I will do everything in my power to make sure everyone continues to belong and that I fight for them. So thank you, Governor, for this awesome responsibility and this tremendous honor. I'll do everything I can to help people and to do as much good as possible. And I'll do my best to make you, my family, my community, and the people of California proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Of course, we're here to answer any questions you have. And again, I just want to think it's wonderful to have your family here with you. You guys should feel very, very proud. This is an exciting moment. And, you know, this is just in closing before we open it up. This has been a long process. It was made longer by some of the delays with the Senate confirmation of the former Attorney General. I had made it clear a number of months ago that I wasn't going to get ahead of that determination, that decision-making. Of course, late last week, I received more formally Attorney General Becerra's resignation letter, and that allowed us the opportunity over the weekend to begin this process, to be with you here today to make this announcement. So this will move quickly. We look forward to having Rob Bonta sworn in, and then that process, which I believe is a 90-day process, for determination by the legislature for confirmation of this appointment moving forward. But this is someone ready to hit the ground running, someone who's been very working hand in glove on many of the issues that are front and center and are certainly topical today. And I appreciate Rob bringing up the most salient and most obvious point around the issue of hate, API hate in this state, in our region, in this city, our nation, for that matter, globally. And I think from his unique life and lived experience, we have someone that doesn't need to be educated on these things, that truly will be a potent and powerful figure to advance not only legal authority to address these issues, but has the moral authority to address these issues head on and more sustainably. With that, of course, here to answer any questions.
Assemblymember Bonta, with this nomination, of course, you begin a new campaign. 2022 is when this election is up. What are you going to do looking forward to that? I know many of the causes you've been involved with are very important to progressives, but are there moderates out there, independents, who might try to challenge you? What's your thoughts about looking ahead to your future here in this job?
Yeah, if I heard the question right, it was about the campaign and 2022 being right around the corner. I've looked at a calendar too, and I see that there's re-election in just over about a year and 7 months. So if I have the honor and privilege of being confirmed by my colleagues in the legislature, I will be immediately in cycle. And I know, and I'm just honored and humbled that there's a lot of folks that are prepared to get behind an election, should there be a confirmation of the appointment, and I will do my part. My theme in any election has always been, the voters will decide, but I will never be outworked. So I'm going to put in the elbow grease, the hard work. I know what it takes to win a campaign. I've won a few up to now. I know this one's different, and I respect and honor that it's a statewide campaign. But I feel I have the infrastructure in place, and I will be moving from day one to with the re-election in mind, because it's so proximate in time.
Something about that, right away. Hey, this is Ben Christopher from Cal Matters. So, Governor, as you mentioned, Assemblyman Bonta is one of the more outspoken members when it comes to criminal justice issues. That's often put him at odds with law enforcement, police, and so forth. And so I wonder, as you were considering this appointment, did you think about the possibility of alienating law enforcement, or how you're planning on navigating that relationship?
Well, we've been working closely with law enforcement leaders across the spectrum. I've been in council and pretty consistent contact with many of the leaders within law enforcement about what they're looking for in the next Attorney General, and I considered those things, and I thought the most important, salient, the one universal thing they wanted was someone who's willing to pick up the phone, willing to listen, willing to engage, and will demonstrate real respect for those men and women in uniform. And I can assure you, in the multiple conversations Rob Bonta and I had, that's table stakes for him. That's exactly what law enforcement will have in Rob Bonta as Attorney General, someone that will keep an open mind, that's not ideological, it's open to argument, it's interested in advancing policies that bring people together. At the same time, we made it clear that there's a lot of areas where we need to improve and a lot of areas for reform. And I think the vast majority of members and leadership and law enforcement are willing to roll up their sleeves and advance that cause as well. And I'm very confident in Rob's capacity to bring people together. And perhaps you want to amplify that a little bit more, because, again, this is a deep point of our conversations.
Absolutely. I mean, I second what the governor has been saying about the need for dialogue, for openness, for an open door, for conversation, to put best ideas on the table. It doesn't matter whose idea it is. If it's a good idea, let's go with it. And I will have those conversations with law enforcement. They will have my respect. We will have dialogue. And we will also have respectful disagreements. And that's okay. That's part of how we move important policy forward. But it won't be because we didn't have a conversation. It won't be because they didn't have a chance to share their perspective. And I believe, deeply that we need to build more trust between law enforcement and our communities. I know that to be true. I've seen communities that have been hurt and harmed and don't have that trust. And I want it for them, and I want it for law enforcement. And I believe that most of law enforcement wants to build that trust as well, and will do what it takes to cultivate and build that trust. And sometimes they need systems change, sometimes they need support, sometimes they need resources to get there, and that is a role that I can play in helping build that trust between community and law enforcement.
Assemblyman Scott Schaefer from KQED. Sort of following up on this theme, as you know, there's been a lot of pushback from conservative groups on some of the criminal justice reforms voters in the legislature have enacted over the last few years, including your bill to end cash bail. Voters did not enact that. They rejected it. How aggressive do you plan to be in terms of pushing these reforms and new ones? And as you look out on the landscape, what additional criminal justice reforms do you see as being necessary? And how are you going to deal with issues around police accountability?
Great question. Multifaceted, so I'll try to take on the different pieces. Thanks, Scott. First, we got to take one step at a time. And the first step is to get confirmed by my colleagues in the legislature to make sure that I can actually serve in this role. But I think what you've seen about who I've been as a leader and what I just said in my opening remarks about the many broken parts of the fundamentally broken criminal justice system gives you insight about what I believe and what I want to address. And so criminal justice reform is ripe for change that can be led by the Attorney General's office. One of the ironies, if I am confirmed and have that honor and privilege, is that many of the laws, that the AG will be responsible for implementing are bills that I've authored. AB 1506, RIPA, Racial Identity and Profiling Act, co-authored with Dr. Shirley Weber. AB 1506 is the independent, thorough oversight and investigation of officer-involved shootings that lead to the death of an unarmed Californian. So, the Racial Justice Act, led by Assemblyman Kalra, and that I co-authored, the Attorney General will be responsible for implementing those. So, I think criminal justice reform has been a top priority for me, and I shouldn't expect that to change.
Quick follow-up on the police records. Your predecessor was not as forthcoming as many in the media would have liked in terms of releasing police personnel records retroactively to the bill. Are you going to take a different course? And maybe, Governor, what do you think about that in terms of the release of these records and how aggressive the AG should be in supporting that?
I don't want to comment too much about the Secretary of Health and Human Services, except to say that I have the utmost respect for him. He's an incredible leader. He's been a friend. I've supported his leadership. I'm honored that he's serving as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's done great work, particularly with health care access and affordability, with starting and creating the Bureau of Environmental Justice, so important. And again, I got to take one step at a time. I know that's an area that deserves concern, or that is of concern and focus. And should I get confirmed, I'll be focusing intently on it.
Andrea Borba, KPIX 5, this is for you, sir. If you are in fact confirmed, your predecessor had a very busy few years filing lawsuits against the Trump administration. You come into a different situation. What will be some of your priorities moving forward if you're confirmed?
Great observation and great question. Thank you. The Secretary of Health and Human Services was an absolute warrior for California values and fought the attacks on our people, our environment, and our values that came out of the Trump administration. We needed him to do that. He had that mandate from us. We need to wrap up some of those lawsuits, and the Attorney General will be involved in that. But I think with a Biden-Harris administration, the return, instead of the view, instead of being outward-looking to attacks on who we are as a state from the Trump administration, will be focused more inward. And I think you need only look at my record that I've focused on over the last 8+ years for what I care about to see what my priorities would be if I have the honor and privilege of being confirmed. Criminal justice reform, environmental justice, consumer protection, making sure we protect our seniors and our children from abuse, human trafficking, making sure that we have health care that is affordable and accessible, making sure that Californians are not being abused by corporations, and that there's no anti-competitive activity. Standing up for defending and protecting our immigrant communities, making sure our workers, who I value so much, are not subject to wage theft or the underground economy. So there's a whole slew of areas that I've worked on as a legislature, and the Attorney General position is a natural and logical extension to continue much of that work.